Thank you for having me, and you made it. This is the last one. I had great difficulty writing about this. In Yemen, if you ask about sectarianism, you get two very different answers. You get a lot of people who say that Zaydism is very close to Sunnism, which in many ways it is, and there's really no sectarian differences in Yemen. There is no real distinction between a Sunni and a Shia mosque in Yemen. And then you get other people who say that the Shia-Sunni divide in Yemen, the Zaydi-Shafi divide, is the largest social divide in Yemen. And so how do you reconcile the two? And I'm not sure. I come to Yemen as a social scientist, one that, I'm an economist and a development specialist, and I avoided religion. In all this medieval stuff, I want to stay out of it, but you can't. You get forced into it. And so I embarked on this a little bit by asking the question, well, what is a Zaydi? Because I was a little bit confused about it. And I found Lisa Medine. She's got an excellent chapter, which I recommend in her 2007 book, Peripheral Visions. She's got one where she, within the social science, with the critical science literature, tries to give us some conceptual tools, which I think would be useful. There'll be a lot of historians, geographers, area specialists who are really honed in the tools of the social sciences, and some of it might help. And I think her stuff actually might help us. And what she emphasizes in this chapter, where she talks about the Houthi rebellion, which is what I'm going to talk about, she talks about situated meetings, which I just heard in Diane's talk, where groups are called, their sort of the boundaries are defined, but they're very much defined in situations, and I'm going to emphasize sort of the political economic situation. I think that's very important to recognize. But it's also one in which, sometimes you get the idea that well, Islam is a sea from which fish can get caught, and you can just kind of pull from this tradition and that tradition, sort of make up whatever you want, and that's not the case. There are others defining you, and whether you're the cohesiveness of your call, I think the cohesiveness of your definition of the group, I think depends on a lot of other things rather than discourse. I think discourse is important, but I think organizational resources and economics are very important, and I want to kind of emphasize. You'll see that I emphasize that. The other thing that Medine does in that chapter is just, by the way, she uses the term nominal Zaydi, and that piqued my interest because nominal Zaydi. What's a nominal Zaydi? Nominal means it is, but it's not, right? It's in name only. That's interesting, a nominal Zaydi. And the thing is, I knew exactly what she was talking about. And it came from my quest of what is a Zaydi. So technically, us and you, in medieval studies, in religious studies, a Zaydi is someone who would adhere to the practices of Zaydism that would, whose Islam would be informed by the texts of Zaydism, right? And if you go by that definition, Yemen doesn't have those nice identity cards that Indonesia has that would make things easy. If you go by that definition, there are very few Zaydis in Yemen. And it's a question that I and many Yemen specialists get asked all the time, Zaydi to Shafi in Yemen. What's the proportion of Shia to Sunni in Yemen? And you get, there's a whole range. You got there, 50, 40, 30, 20, If we use that definition, I would say, 10, 5, very small. And on the other hand, Zaydi has another meaning, and it comes out of a context that I'm going to try to explain to you here, that has nothing to do really with religion. And in that context, there's a much larger Zaydi community, although they don't read any Zaydi texts and wouldn't go to any Zaydi mosque. So let me explain Zaydi Wahhabi. The story begins with the imamate, and the Zaydi imamate that comes to Yemen in the 800s, late 9th century. It's Zaydi. It comes to Yemen and situates itself in tribal society in the north. It's important to recognize that the Zaydi imamate was not very state-like. It very much lived within northern Yemeni tribal society, and its power was its ability to sort of position itself as the religious authority amongst the tribes, and to sort of negotiate amongst tribes and maintain peace amongst tribes. But it didn't have any sort of cohesive use of force itself. It had to live within tribes. And part of Zaydiism is that the Amir must be from Ahl Bayt. And so there is this a pedigree of people who are the Sayyids. And they claim descent from the Prophet. And in the imamate, they're the only ones that are eligible to be to rule the community, and they create a space for themselves as religious authorities. So they are the religious authorities amongst the tribes in the north. And then, we could say for much of Yemeni history in the northern tribal areas, the tribes are living amongst the imamate. We could say that the tribesmen are Zaydi as well. But there's a distinction between the tribesmen and the Sayyids that are there. And then in Yemen's geography, the northern tribal areas are rather sparse, and the agricultural heart of Yemen is in what's called the middle regions around Taiz and Ib, which are also Shafi'i. I hate to make that broad categorization, but we're happy for now. And the imamate in the northern areas often ruled those areas in Yemeni history, and much of the resources come from there. So you get a situation where the northern tribes are, and the imamate are extracting agricultural resources and controlling the agricultural resources, which are the main source of wealth from the middle regions. Okay, then the Civil War comes in 1962 when the Republic is founded. And it's important to recognize that the Republicans, there are many stripes, but the Republicans come from military officers that are trained overseas, model themselves after the free officers, and they are Zaydi. The Republicans, many of the Republicans, the top leadership is Zaydi. Salah is Zaydi. And they overthrow, when they attack the imamate, they're not attacking Zaydiism. They are attacking backwardness. They are attacking the royalty. And in the Civil War, 62 to 70, the two sides are Republican and royalist. That's the way it's described. Royalist versus the Republicans. And of course, Saudi Arabia is behind the royalists, and Egypt is behind the Republicans. In the north, in the tribal areas, you get a split. Some of the tribes are going with the royalists. Other tribes, most famously, Abdul Hussein al-Ahmar, and who becomes, he's a key member of the Hashid Tribal Confederation. He, because the Imam executed his brother and his father, is a strong Republican and a key to, very important in the war in the north and the victory of the Republicans in the north. So immediately after the Civil War, which is ended by kind of a stalemate, and this is important to understanding Yemeni culture and politics, in that the Republican won, the Republicans held out, but it was a compromise. And so you have a Republican government with a lot of the royalist leaders that are brought in, so it's culturally conservative, but a Republican government. And that's very important understanding the initial identity of modern Yemen. Then things begin to immediately shift at the end of the war, the Civil War, when the South, which becomes the PDRY, and actually in the North as well, amongst the Republican factions, you have the leftist factions, and they're becoming stronger, and they're particularly emboldened by the takeover and the leftist trend in the south in the PDRY. And so there's a shift within the Northern Republic to get rid of the left. There's a purge. A lot of the left from the north ends up in the PDRY in the south. And in the PDRY in the south, we have our only communist government, truly communist government in the Arab world. And the tensions between the two threaten the north and threaten Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia, having backed the royalists, now tries to shape the north by making it more conservative. And the way they do this is through the creation of Islah. And Islah is really formed out of the termination of towards the end of the Second Civil War in 1979 in the middle regions, that key agricultural region of Yemen. There's the National Democratic Front, which is a leftist insurrection supported by the South, but in the north, that threatens the government of Ali Abdullah Saleh, who is now in power. And Islah is formed. Islah is kind of an umbrella organization. It has the Muslim Brotherhood in it. It has Abdullah bin Hussein al-Ahmar, who's the leadership of the Hashid Tribal Confederation. And it has a kind of conservative merchants, anti-communist merchants from the Taiz region as well, the middle region as well. And here, this is the classic, the religion is being used against the left. This is the godless communists in the south are threatening the republic, and so the Saudis back Islah. And within Islah, so Abdullah bin Hussein al-Akbar, he's really the tribal element, but you have a Muslim Brotherhood. You have Zandani, who's going to become important, who people say is more the Salafist section. And you have as well, sorry, lost it there. Okay, Islah, and you have amongst them many nominal Zaydis. Nominal Zaydis who are now Muslim Brotherhood, they're now Salafi, and the most famous of these, who's not actually under Islam, is Muqbil al-Wadai, and he's the grandfather of Salafism in Yemen. He was accused by the Saudis of being behind the attack on the Grand Mosque in 1979 and expelled from Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, he's not a Saudi Arabian, okay? He was expelled from Saudi Arabia. But he founds Salafism in Yemen. And he does so, he's from the northern area. He's from the area that the Sayyids are concentrated in Sada. And he explicitly says, he's a tribesman, he's Wadai. He says, I went to the mosque, the Zaydi mosque. I was searching for knowledge. They rejected me because I was a tribesman. I'm becoming a Salafi because Salafism emphasizes equality. Equality goals. And so, very much in the Islah and the Salafi trend in Yemen, there is an attack on the privilege of the Sayyids, the privilege in Zaydism of the Sayyids. And this is in the north. These are nominal Zaydis. These are people that are in the northern part of Yemen that is considered Zaydi, but they're very much they're Wahhabis, they're Salafis. Then in 1990, Yemen comes together, is unified. The south collapses. They no longer have financial support, and it's resolved in a war in 1994, in which the South is defeated, the Yemeni Socialist Party is defeated, and at that point, in the context of what's going to become the war on terror, actually Yemen predates the war on terror a little bit. Ali Abdullah Saleh, who was also a nominal Zaydi, he begins to shift away from Islah because having eliminated the left, the socialists, with his allies, Saudi Arabia and Islah, the Islah party, he now recognizes that they are the biggest threat to his regime. And so he begins to push them away. in the meantime, in 1990, when Yemen came together in the new global order, Yemen adopted kind of a liberalism, multi-partyism, elections, all this sort of thing. And the Sada, the Sayyids in the north, they're grappling with how do we live in this republic. This republic is here to stay, it appears. And so there's various responses. I'd say the majority one is just to go on and make their lives and not worry about it. But some decide that they want to sort of reformulate. There's various reformulations. One of them is Hizb al-Haq. And Hizb al-Haq is a party of the Sayyids. And in the elections of 1993, they have two representatives. One of them is Hussein al-Houthi. And they don't do very well. They only get two. And Hussein al-Houthi, he decides that these politics are not going to further the interests of Zaydiism or of the Sayyids in the north. And so he breaks off and he forms this organization called Shabab al-Mu'min. And Shabab al-Mu'min is a youth organization. It really is kind of to bring Zaydiism to the youth. Yemen is a very young country. And amongst the Islah, Salafi organizations in the north, one of their powerful draws is summer camps for kids. And there's lots of well-funded summer camps that people are liking. But of course, it's coming with Salafi and Muslim Brotherhood and such ideas, and the youth are being drawn into it. And so Shabab al-Mu'mineen is a response to it. And it works quite well. They're popular summer camps, and they've got them going. And it's about sort of rejuvenating Zaydiism, bringing Zaydi ideas to the youth and whatnot. It goes quite well. Hussein al-Houthi goes off to Sudan for study, and he comes back. And then in 2002, something shifts, and he decides that just sort of an educational program, which was what Shabab al-Mu'min wasn't sufficient. That he needed to do something more, and he starts to agitate politically, and he takes Shabab al-Mu'min, or a portion of it, and he begins his famous thing, the chant, death to America, death to Israel, long live Islam. And that comes from Iran. It's an adaptation of an Iranian chant. He starts it in 2002, but it really hits home in 2003 and 2004 in the context of the U.S. invasion of Iraq. And Ali al-Assad, who is an ally of the Americans in the war on terror, he says that he's going to defend the Americans in this. He's not for the invasion, of course, but he defends the Americans. And the Houthi chant, it provokes the president. And so the president in 2004 goes to arrest him. The military goes to arrest Hussein al-Houthi. A short battle breaks out in the summer of 2004. There's a war, and Hussein al-Houthi is killed. Nobody thinks, I was there at the time, everybody thinks it's all over. And this is important. I want to say two things about this. One, Hussein al-Houthi, he came from traditional Zaydi education. His father was a very prestigious Zaydi scholar. And he, at the same time, a big part of his message is that the Shia are the leaders of the Muslim world against the American Zionist project, and hence the chant that he gives. And I checked the Zaydi sources, and there's nothing about American Zionist project in the traditional sources of Zaydism. Right? This is a modern geopolitical project. And not only that, what's interesting is that he says it's clearly an alliance with Iran, but at the same time he says that the Imamiyya, the Twelvers, this thing about the infallibility of the Imam, which the Zaydis reject, this is their nonsense. And of course, then only the Zaydis are the true leaders of the Muslim world against the American Zionist project. And so you see, this is sort of Iranian offshoot. It's a big geopolitical thing. After Hussein is killed, his father, 83 years old, runs to the north and says, "I'm going to continue my son's battle." And there's a series of wars that take place. And what I think is interesting about this is that the Houthi movement now, in this third war of the Malik, a brother, a distant brother of Hussein, that takes over the leadership. And the Houthi movement is less now about Zaydiism as it is as a credible leadership against Ali al-Saleh and the abuses of the regime. And where is their power? Their power is their ability to stand up to Ali al-Saleh. Their power is in their ability to turn over the Hashid tribal confederation, Abdullah bin Hussein al-Ahmar, the Saudis' key supporters in Yemen. They are able to use grievances within the tribes against the al-Ahmar's leadership, turn it over, and at the same time they're able to track people who are damaged by the wars of Ali al-Saleh in the north. And so it's not so much the Houthis leading the Zaydis as it is the Houthis providing credible leadership, part of which comes from their being Sayyids from prestigious families, but largely it has to do with their ability as an organization to effectively fight against Ali al-Saleh. And I'm short on time, but I would continue the story to say that when the Houthi take over, and allied now with Ali al-Saleh for very different reasons in 2014, that they are never claiming to reestablish the imamate, and that they work very much within the Yemeni state. And so what they are sort of positioning themselves as is authoritative leaders of the Yemeni state, not as leaders of the Zaydi movement. So I heard a number of times that the Houthi are leading the Zaydi, and I'm again, what is a Zaydi? And I don't see the Houthi movement as particularly leading the Zaydis. Even what they call Zaydis, and in 2014, after taking over Sana'a, one of the things they did was they had huge celebrations for Ashura, which Zaydis don't do. And so, even their Zaydism is a little questionable. So I see it more as a battle over state, and their ability to do so has a lot to do with their ability to negotiate very local politics, tribal politics, and other politics. And I say another big part of it is once you have an effective organization and you have funds, a lot of the militias in Yemen, Al-Qaeda, the Muqawama in the south, the Houthi militias, and even Salah's forces, which are more organized. A lot of it depends upon can you pay? Can you pay the youth to go and fight? And those kinds of resources, I think, are very important. A lot of people fighting for Houthi or fighting for Al-Qaeda, they don't worry about medieval debates over Islam, right? Thank you.